Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. And in this particular event, we will be talking about vSphere security. And when we are going to talk about vSphere security, it's always good to check it from one of the expert who is spending good amount of time day in day out on that particular domain itself. So I'm handing over to Bob, who is currently working as a technical marketing architect at VMware for cloud infrastructure security team. And let's first learn a little bit about Bob from himself, and then we'll jump into the topic and content. Bob, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to talk with VMUG groups around the world, and you folks, I really appreciate you inviting me to do this. Yeah, as stated, I'm Bob Plankers. I'm a staff technical marketing architect. I'm very much like Jatin. In fact, he could do this. He knows a lot about this stuff as well. But yeah, I do security and compliance sorts of things. I work in that space a lot. I write a lot of this outbound security messaging that VMware has. I don't do our VMSAs themselves, but I'm the guy writing the Q&As, the frequently asked questions lists around them, things like that. And really have been trying for the last 4 years to get customers to think about how to be secure. Think about things like ransomware. Ransomware is the end result of a breach that's already going on. Ransomware is not a thing by itself. Somebody's got to break in, and getting people to think about that sort of stuff. And it's really important. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak here. Would you like me to just get started then? Share my screen and.
Sure, definitely, Bob.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Well, then let's get going here then. So you folks had asked me to talk about securing vSphere, and that's a topic very near and dear to my heart. I'm old school infrastructure guy. I've been at VMware for 4 years now, 4 years and 3 months or so. And before that, I worked in the public sector in the US for 23 years at a university, and many of those years were spent as a vSphere admin. So I live the misery that is, security, and happy to talk about it now. So yeah, here, let's move forward. Typical disclaimers, if we do wander into, if you've got questions, comments, whatever, and want to put them in the Q&A, please do. I'll answer them as we go. In fact, why don't I open the Q&A here? And I'll keep an eye on that. Here, I've got many monitors. There we go. So this is the normal VMworld disclaimer if we talk about futures or whatever. This one's the more interesting one, though. I'm so cool, I have 2 disclaimers. And this one really is a lawyer's idea of just saying that security really depends on context. What you might read on the internet, what some random guy on a Zoom webinar might say about security might be a good idea, or it might be a bad idea for you as well, because your environment is always, everybody's environments are different. The technology is set up differently. The business needs are different, all of that stuff. And so, you have to kind of use your own head when it comes to figuring out what's the right solution. And there's an art to it. That's the tricky thing about security, and on the low end, you've got compliance. On the high end, you've got, people that do a lot of security, and security is always a trade-off as well. Sometimes you're trading off money and budget and that. You're trading off staff time in many cases. And yeah, there we go. The trading off staff time in many cases, which is just a form of budget, really. I often joke that you're trading off sysadmin will to live, especially with things like idle timeouts and whatever. I love being logged out every time I stop to get a new cup of coffee, that sort of thing. But yeah, joking aside, well, that I'm not actually joking. I'm being sarcastic about that. But at any rate, and to that end, figuring out where that line is with security. Don't go crazy. Don't be this guy. This is not me, by the way. Clearly, this is me. But as we're jumping into this, trying to figure out where the line is between crazy and not. And so, starting out here, and one of the things I want to talk about, I don't want to talk about the deep technical controls. People get really wound up in the technical controls, and we have the security configuration guide for that, the hardening guidance for vSphere and such. But that only goes so far. There's that doesn't cover use of features and things. Like it doesn't say, hey, you should use VM encryption or vSAN encryption. It doesn't say, hey, you should protect your network connections with redundancy so that you can patch your network switches and things like that. It only goes so far, and there's limits to it. And so what I want to talk about today is really sort of the other parts of it, the design aspects of it, and work our way into that, because if you set an environment up well, you have no problems patching. You have no problems with standing an outage, and dealing with a lot of these problems gets a lot easier. So I do want to talk a little bit about the split between securing workloads and securing infrastructure. The tools and tactics and procedures for defending infrastructure are different than what we use for workloads themselves. The protections for workloads, we've got, in the VMware space, we've got NSX, we've got Carbon Black, all that stuff. But those things depend heavily on the infrastructure itself, and there's dependencies there and dependency loops. And so, more importantly, we often talk about zero trust. In fact, I'm kind of glad we've stopped talking about zero trust so much in the last 6 months or so. People were talking about zero trust a lot in the terms of, like, I'd like to buy 3 zero trusts, please. And that's not how it works. Zero trust is more of a design concept, and not trusting. We used to do the sort of Cold War trust but verify sort of thing. And now we really want to turn that around, at least for user facing things. Turn that around to never trust, always verify that that's the right, a human there, and it's the right human. It's the one that's truly authorized to be there. And that's really tricky. And it's even trickier at the infrastructure level, because eventually ESXi is going to have to trust a storage array. It's going to have to trust a network switch at a very basic level. And so we need to establish that trust in different ways. And where we can't establish trust very readily, we need to have defense in depth. We need to have layers of protections, defense in depth, even just, patching and then firewalling and good authentication practices and good authorization practices, splitting authentication and authorization. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. Stuff like that. So that if we lose one of those, say there is a vulnerability, then we're covered. We've got some time. Our firewalls will take care of it. Our authentication systems will keep the attackers out, that sort of thing, until we can get a chance to patch. The other thing that I want to talk about, I guess I want to stop and say it's important to defend workloads too. Workloads are the things that face out. They're the gateways to, well, the real problem with workloads is that people want to use them, is what it comes down to. And the old joke, if we just didn't have customers, if we just didn't have users, our lives would be easier as sysadmins, but unfortunately that isn't the case. The two come as a complete set, and but it reminds me, I had a chief operating officer many years ago in sort of my previous life that would tell me, and I quote, to remind the security guys that we bought these systems to use them. And one, he wasn't wrong. Two, he's talking about that trade-off there, like that. Where's that line for configuring security so that you keep the bad folks out, but you let the good folks in, And heck, availability is a core tenet of information security. If you think about the CIA triad, confidentiality, which is generally what we think about as security, but there's also integrity, I, and A for availability. And so availability is really important. If the system's down, what good is it? So to let users into our workloads, we sysadmins, we punch holes in our firewalls, right? So that ostensibly so that the good guys can get in. But of course, this means attackers can get in too, and sorting out who's good and who's bad. We'll leave that to tools like, IDS and IPS tools. We'll leave that to Carbon Blacks and things like that. And so, that's workloads. If, these infrastructures don't exist on their own, they exist to serve these workloads, but workloads are a path in for attackers. And so we need to make sure that that's those paths are covered as well. When we talk about attackers, people like to think of attackers like this. It often comes from our view of the world as seen through movies and that, the hackers and stuff like that. Probably a guy here in a hoodie, sitting in it seems like a hazy room. Something's on fire, clearly. Maybe, that can't be good for their lungs. We wonder why hackers are up attacking us late at night. It's totally not because of time zone differences. It's totally because all of this blue light in the room keeping them up, that sort of thing. And I'm joking, clearly, but this is what people think of as attackers, that it's just some, as we would say, lone wolf sort of person. And in reality, it's more like this. Our attackers are businesses. They have CEOs, they've got managers, they've got performance reviews and fire drills and holiday parties. They fight with their copiers, like I fight with a copier, and their job is to steal our stuff, steal our money, steal our intellectual property, steal our records and that, so that they can blackmail us, so that they can blackmail our customers, that sort of thing. And not just, not VMware, but all of us in general, like a blackmail and that level of extortion. That's what happens. Ransomware, as I was saying earlier, ransomware is the end of an attack. These breaches, IBM did a study a year and a half ago now that said that they found that the average breach that resulted in ransomware, ended in ransomware, was 341 days long. And that's a long time, from initial access, getting in and all of that stuff, to finally, being noisy and ransoming and everything. And what they did in the meantime, they stole everything. They, figured out what was important, blackmail downstream customers. Imagine a legal firm, with all secrets and all that stuff. That's really troublesome. So what do we do about this? Well, we use our brains. We have to think about it a little bit. We need to figure out where we've got a lot of, I guess what I would describe as tribal knowledge in the vSphere world, and that, some of it's good, some of it needs to change. How do we do that? And, how do we make it harder for attackers to get in? And then how do we make it so ransomware and these attacks, they're all different, how do we make it so that we can detect a bad guy that's in our infrastructure, a bad actor, a threat actor that did manage to get in? How can we force them to make errors so that we will see failed logins? We'll see them shutting off security controls and things like that. vSphere 8, for example, well, vSphere 7 introduced the exec installed only flag. It wasn't turned on by default. We often do this. We'll introduce something that we want to turn on by default later. We'll work on it in a major version. So 7 had it, 8 turns it on by default. And if you, what it does is it prevents attackers from executing. They can't just put a program on ESXi. They can't just upload a binary to ESXi and run it anymore, unless it comes from a signed VIB, unless it's been installed properly. And if they try to shut that off, you'll get and if we try to shut it off, we'll get an undismissible warning banner. You'll get a little, yellow triangle with an exclamation point in it. And that's a clue, and those clues are important. I don't know if you folks have ever read the Cuckoo's Egg. There's a book about a Californian sysadmin back in the 80s or whatever that had an accounting error on his VAX, and he traced it all down to an international spy ring, hacking ring, or whatever. And but it's just those little clues that we want to leave ourselves that something's wrong, and things that we want to monitor for. And so that's really important. And then the real trick to all of this stuff, that's an important trick. The real trick to doing this is, how do we make it the attackers miserable? How do we make them, force them to make errors? How do we make them miserable without making ourselves miserable? Where is that line? Where's that trade-off again? Traditional IT security models, I often compare them to medieval castles. It's an analogy, all analogies are, good and bad, but many even new environments that are deployed nowadays are like this, where you've got a well-known front door that's heavily defended. We've got the virtual equivalent of a moat. We've got big, thick walls and guard towers and that. But once you're inside, you can kind of do whatever you want, And what we really need to be thinking about when we're talking about preventing attacks, deterring attacks, detecting attacks, taking that 341 days and condensing it down into 1 day, 2 days, how do we detect this stuff fast? We need something more like this, and not to advocate this not to advocate for prisons necessarily, but they do make a good analogy for internal controls. This is the former U.S. prison Alcatraz. It's out in the San Francisco Bay, and it's like a castle. I mean, you don't want to stay in it, clearly, and that, but it's got big walls. It's got a known defended front door. It's got those cliffs. It's got a moat of sorts, the San Francisco Bay, which is cold and has nasty tides and currents and sharks and things. But the thing is, and my point really is, that it's also got internal controls. And no matter, how you feel about prisons, I'm not a big fan of prisons myself, and think a lot of that, we need to think heavily about the way that stuff works in the world. But, they've got internal controls. Somebody gets out of this and you can see them, there's additional controls, egress controls at the end of all of the stuff. There's monitoring, and so that's what we need. We're not a prison necessarily, but we need more layers, and we need more thoughtful layers in our own environments. And so, yeah, thoughtful is the point here, and that's why I want to talk about system design sorts of things rather than just a checklist. If it's just a checklist, the world would be secure. We wouldn't have any ransomware. Everyone would hail would say, hey, the security configuration guide is the answer to all of life's problems. Done, and we'd move on. But it's not, and so we need to evolve a little bit, and we want to evolve into something that is competitive and continues existing, and not something that goes extinct or suffers from ransomware and that. And so, so let's think about, how we get into the bad situations. How did we get here in the first place? Well, a couple of things, 3 things mostly I want to talk about. Number one, by far, breaches start at desktops, because humans are going to be humans, and we will click. And I count myself as a human. This morning something's up with my left eye, for example, and my phone, as I get older, my phone gets further from my face, and those Unicode characters in DNS, they're great for internationalization and all that stuff, but there's characters in there that you make URLs look kind of like the legitimate URL, except they're not, and that's a really dangerous thing, and we'll click on stuff. I've clicked on dumb stuff in my past, and gone, oh crap, and for a user, what does that mean for a user on a desktop? That might mean a compromise if the desktop's not fully patched and maintained. maybe the desktop gets compromised, and then with it, a user account, the user account that's logged in, the domain user, in many cases where companies are using Active Directory. And I don't mean to throw Active Directory under the bus, but it's so successful, everyone's using it, and it's the way people deploy it can help or it can hurt, and so it's just everywhere, and so we can substitute in the Azure ADs and pings and octas and central LDAP servers, whatever, but yeah, I'll just pick on AD instead. But yeah, so the user account is logged in. Pardon me just a second here. But one of the nice things about vSphere admins is that there usually aren't as many vSphere admins in an organization as there are users. Usually there's just a handful of folks like you folks and me and that, and so we can lock that stuff down. We can say that curbing access to management interfaces, keeping desktops, the user population, the desktops away from everything. I often liken it to treating, it's kind of like the movie The Matrix, where we have to think of all of our users, all of the people in the corporation, in our businesses, as somebody that can turn into one of the agents at any time, and agents being bad in this case. We need to prepare for that. So the second biggest problem is really a follow-on to the first problem, compromised credentials. That attacker pivots from the compromised desktop and compromised domain user account. They go looking for Active Directory domain controllers because it's the keys to everything, right? And if a lot of companies are a little scared of their Active Directory, they won't they don't patch it regularly because, oh my goodness, what would happen if the patch broke something? Well, you have a choice. You can have the patch break something. Well, hopefully the patch doesn't break something. And this is a good argument for good patching practices, rolling updates. Don't do them all at the same time. Take a snapshot of them, that sort of thing. You can do that with Active Directory DCs nowadays. The generation ID, for example, is supported in vSphere, so you could snapshot it if you want. You don't get the weird rollback problems that you used to, that sort of thing. And but that's an aside. People are a little scared of their Active Directories, and so they don't patch them, and so vulnerabilities persist there. Vulnerabilities that an attacker can use to break into. Further break into everything. They turn that domain user into a domain admin, and then domain admins can do anything, right? They can drop themselves into the vSphere admins group, and now they're a vSphere admin. They can, create accounts. They create themselves their own account, which is a vSphere admin or a firewall admin. And I'd like to say that I'm joking, but I'm not, or storage admin or backup admin, that sort of thing. And so, it's a little scary in that regard. Multi-factor authentication helps a lot with this, but it also isn't perfect. The whole industry here has seen attackers spamming the push MFA systems. Uber was hacked, the ride sharing service. It was hacked in this last fall, and it was public. I don't feel too bad using them as an example because, well, they were open about it, and I appreciate that. Transparency helps all of us learn. That one of their engineers, one of their senior engineering staff, was getting all of these push MFA. Their phone was going nuts in the middle of the night. And what did they do? They rolled over and made it stop. Well, how did they make it? Pardon me. How did they make it stop? Well, they pushed the OK button. They let the attacker in. Whoops. That's not the way that's supposed to work. And so, not perfect, but it gets us further. There's no one solution to any of this stuff. There's no one solution to ransomware. There's no one solution to attacks, and that they're all a little different. And we need to think about it holistically, which is why I'm talking about a lot of this stuff and not just technical things. The other problem with MFA is that a lot of attacks just don't need it, and their vulnerabilities persist. And that's the third big thing that I want to talk about here. You don't need the key to the door when somebody left the window wide open right next to it, and I didn't, like I was saying earlier, I did this stuff for a long time. Software vulnerabilities and patching. How do you get rid of software vulnerabilities? Well, you patch. That's the only way to get rid of a vulnerability. A workaround just hides it, like adds a layer there. Workarounds are often, they can buy you time, but over time, the workaround ends up being more problematic than just having patched in most cases, and the, but patching itself is just such a thankless job. At the best, you get right back to where you were to start with, and it doesn't look like anything changed. And you get a lot of managers and folks that don't get it, that are in management, and that they don't really understand. It looked like you did a lot of work and nothing happened, and that's actually perfect. That's exactly what you want out of patching, right? If we could reduce the amount of work, that's good, and that's something that VMware is focusing on here too. How do we lifecycle manager, things like that? How do we make it easier? But it comes down to availability practices, patching especially. Patching is just a small availability test. Organizations that can't patch a system, often it's because, well, we can't have it down. Well, okay, if you can't patch it, if you can't have it down for the brief time while you're making it, resecuring it and things, how are you going to handle a real outage? And that often gets them thinking, how are we going to deal with a real situation? And I'm not even talking about an attack, though an attack is definitely something that is a possibility. I'm talking about, how about a hardware failure? Hardware fails, you lose the RAM errors. There's all manner of things that can happen in a host, and yeah, what are you going to do if something like that happens? And so, you're solving multiple problems at once. Late last year, the folks at VMware in our Octo group, our Office of the CTO group, and I actually built out an environment. It may sound crazy, but we actually installed vSphere, and us technical marketing types, we do this all the time, like whatever. But, VMware, it's interesting. We don't actually install vSphere from scratch all that much. We've got automated systems to deploy it and that, so we can test it and things. But we actually got a pile of hardware, and and we stopped, and we're like, how we've got all this tribal knowledge, right? Like, let's write it down. We kind of realized that we need to write this stuff down, and we need to go through it, and we need to think about how, is it valid anymore? Is it good advice to prevent ransomware, to deter ransomware, that sort of thing? And so we actually wrote a paper about it. I've got the link to all this stuff at the end. It's out on core.vmware.com, core.vmware.com, and where we keep a lot of our stuff. If you go out to core, and if I'm boring you, now's a good time to do that. Not that I want you to go anywhere or whatever, but the solutions tab has got security, it's got compliance, it's got ransomware resilience, that sort of thing in it. A lot of good stuff out there. But what we also wanted to do, you see a lot of stuff, especially out on the internet, that tells you what to do, but not why to do it. It doesn't discuss it. We've been seeing a lot of the stuff in context of the ESXi ARGs ransomware lately too, and I'll talk about that towards the end here. But ESXi ARGs is a little different in that they don't appear to be stealing anything. They're just smash and grab vandals, basically. But which is different. It's always something new. But we see advice out on the internet telling people to do one weird trick to stop all ransomware, or whatever, and they don't tell you why it works. They often don't understand why it doesn't work, and what the pros and cons of it are. And I see it like building a building. This stuff is a design exercise. You need to understand why, so that you can map it. Us vSphere admins, we need to be able to map it to our business requirements, and we need to be able to talk about this stuff with our managers, who are maybe aren't vSphere admins, maybe don't know that much about the infrastructure. We need to be able to explain it to them, and and it's a design exercise or building into a new system. Often by the time you get to the hardening guidance and the security configuration guide, you've already got a working environment. And so we need to consider how to do this stuff at a more foundational level. This foundation, by the way, I'm absolutely in love with the Adobe stock photo library, which you've probably can tell here, but that foundation there, it looks like a really nice one, but will it have any cracks in it? We don't want cracks in your foundations, and those cracks, will they get bigger over time? Do they let attackers in? Do they prevent us from keeping attackers out? There's a subtle difference there, but we want to be able to help folks. So that paper is really interesting too. But I want to step through some of the more tactical things, that we can do to prevent some of these common issues. And how do we design a system that hardens against social engineering? How do we design a system to trust our users a little less? There was a show in the U.S. in the late 1990s and early 2000s called the X-Files. Don't know if you folks are familiar with it at all. It's about aliens and all kinds of stuff. And they had the saying, trust no one, and that's about right. Everyone that can get to the management interfaces of your infrastructure is a threat. If I can turn into a threat, you could turn into a threat. Our desktops can turn into a threat, that sort of thing. So we go old school, we limit it. We use the idea of least privilege, the security concept of least privilege. Least privilege, by the way, is tied to one of the biggest lies that sysadmins tell themselves, which is, I'm just going to get this working right now. I'll just let it log in as administrator. I'll just get it working. I'll open the firewall up, no problem. I'll come back and fix it later. Wrong. You will not come back and fix it later. You will move on, and maybe you are better than me, but like I'm a little ADHD to start with, and so I forget about that stuff, and I'm not alone. And getting back to fixing it, doing it right, it's off. If you don't do it right the first time, you often can't fix it later on, and so that's why I tell people vCenter server, when you're designing these environments, that vCenter server is for vSphere admins, just as you wouldn't let anybody in your organization walk around in your data center, walk around in your physical data center. Well, maybe you do, but that's all. Again, context is everything, and your situation is going to be different than others. But most organizations don't let anybody just wander around in the server closet or data center or whatever. They put a lock on the door, that sort of thing. And, vCenter server is the front door to the virtual infrastructure. We need to put a lock on it as well, so that people just can't wander around. Workload admins are usually the ones that are asking for console access. Can I get console access? And there are can be some legitimate uses for that. If you've had a problem and you need to recover VMs or something, you're going to need console access, that sort of thing. But most operations, they should be going in through RDP or SSH, because that also makes their management traffic, their connections, and that's subject to IDS, IPS, and it makes it a lot easier to do firewall rules and stuff like that for the management interfaces. It can just be for people like myself, the infrastructure management folks, and keep the workload folks out of there. In an emergency, you can change things, but definitely try to keep those populations of people apart and that sort of thing. And people asking to RDP in to the Windows console just have never heard of the /console flag for the RDP client, is what it amounts to, what I found. Other ways we can isolate management interfaces, we can use separate VLANs for them. Cut things apart on the network. VLANs are not perfect. They're not designed as a security solution per se. And there's some tricks for, especially if you have default VLANs running. One of the things we do have in the hardening guide is to remove default VLANs from the access ports. And that, so if you're doing VLAN tags, maybe not access ports, but if you're doing tagged trunks and stuff like that, don't have a default VLAN. There's some attacks where you can add headers to the packets so that you end up on the wrong, you can send traffic to the wrong VLANs and things like that. Network equipment is very helpful in trying to get traffic where it belongs, and you can exploit that a little bit. Separate NICs. Yeah, do you really need separate NICs? Some organizations absolutely want that separation, and put their management traffic on one set of NICs and then their workload traffic on another. Other places will separate storage traffic, and I've always liked separating storage traffic from all the other workload and management traffic. And that's usually how I built environments, where I basically had 4 network interfaces, 2 that went to storage and 2 that did everything else, including management. And I ran VLANs on those other 2, the workload ones and management ones, just to keep from a performance perspective. Talk more about availability. It's easier to troubleshoot performance when you're set up like that. But firewalls, you've got a VLAN there, you can put a firewall on that network segment as well. If you don't have a firewall, ACLs are. The problem with ACLs is just that they're not reflexive. They don't, the modern firewalls, the traditional sort of Linux-based firewall will correlate the traffic going out with traffic coming back in and allow it through. ACLs are not that smart. And so you have to allow the traffic back through. And that's a problem, especially with content distribution networks for patching and things like that. But most vendors, and VMware included, we have a well-known IP address for our content distribution networks. There's a KB article about that you can let through so that you can patch still. You can also do firewalls at the infrastructure component levels too. They're simple. They're more like ACLs than anything than a modern firewall, but they're not meant to be a modern firewall. They're meant to be vCenter servers, firewall, host-based firewall. This is the VAMI, the interface for configuring the cluster firewall itself, or not the cluster firewall, but the appliance firewall. And and you can set this up. This is it's a nice little way to basically add another layer of protection. And especially in environments that don't have a firewall, or the firewall admins don't want to limit things as much as you might want, you can do it here. Just make sure that before you add that reject line at the bottom, that you put your own IP address in the top. Another way to do it, maybe not for vCenter server, and ESXi has got a firewall in it too. And again, they're more like ACLs than anything. But the distributed switches, the port groups, have got traffic filtering and marking, and you can configure what is effectively an ACL on the port group. And so you can you can configure stuff to. This is actually pretty handy, whether you'd want to use it or not, but it's something to keep in your back pocket. And and I also remind people that you can create multiple, so you can only have one set of rules. The rules apply to everything in that port group, and that's the tricky part. But you can have more than one port group for the same VLAN, attached to the same network uplinks, all that stuff. So something to keep in mind. Ingress and egress. There's a lot of folks that most folks just filter incoming traffic. The real interesting stuff is when you're filtering outgoing traffic. One, massive pain in your rear. It's harder to do, but that's where you see budding infections. That's where you see things reaching out, especially if you're logging that traffic. You'll see things going out to, that's where you learn about malware that might be in your environment, because it's going to trigger logging rules. You basically log that traffic and monitor for it, and that, especially on the management interfaces. Whether you want to do this for your whole organization or not, I would maybe just start with your management interfaces for your infrastructure there. But you'll learn things, and that's a good way to see too. Log4j, for example, people who were filtering egress traffic were able to see whether they were being attacked or not. And if they were blocking the egress traffic, those attacks didn't work. And that was cool. That actually, it made the effort worth it. And a lot of the problem with security is that if it works, you don't see anything, right? It's hard to, how do you prove a negative? It's just, yeah. So you guys get it. Ports.vmware.com has all of the network ports. This is an old screenshot. We've got vSphere 8 up there as well. Actually, it's just called vSphere now. We got rid of the 7. But we've got 6.5, 6.7, 7, and 8 up there. I spent a long time figuring this out, so please use it. I did it for me 6 years ago is what I did, and I'm hoping it helps everyone else. And so it's got ICMP stuff in there. Don't block all ICMP. ICMP is actually helpful for performance, the path MTU discovery, things like that. So anyhow, routed and unrouted, another interesting design decision. Do you really need a routed vMotion network? Do you really need a routed vSAN network? Maybe the answer is yes. In many cases, I know in my past, I had little islands of where at each site I had vSAN and vMotion and all that stuff, but it didn't have to leave the network in many cases. And so we weren't vMotioning across between sites. And in fact, we used Veeam backup and replication to move things between sites if it absolutely had to happen. But so maybe you just don't route that stuff to start with, and if you don't have a route, how do you get out? So next stop here is compromised credentials. How do we deal with this? Well, I've talked a little bit about this already. Local authentication. A lot of folks jump to, well, we'll just do local authentication, and that's fine, but that's harder to manage. You've got a lot more to monitor and manage, and if somebody leaves your organization, you got to track down all those accounts, that sort of thing. So but the problems with connecting to the central AD instance. We talked about those, like you get a lot of trust in another thing that's a big target for attackers. Maybe you have a separate Active Directory. A lot of organizations are doing that. They actually have an infrastructure AD that they put behind all their firewalls and inside the protected perimeter, and just use it that way and that sort of thing. Identity federation is a nice little thing that we introduced in vSphere 7 and vSphere 8 update 1. Not to talk too much about futures, but 8 update 1 will be the first time so we're bringing the Workspace ONE broker and the thing that powers VIDM and all that stuff. Everyone else at VMware uses it. We're going to start using it too. And the first stop here is Okta support. We've got ADFS support that was a part of 7, but direct Okta support in 8 update 1 here as well. And so that's nice because you can inject multi-factor authentication there too. Authentication versus authorization. I talked about this a little bit. Don't add that. Don't use an AD group. This is a change that most places can make right now. Is don't use an AD group, the vSphere admins group, like I have in my screenshot here. Break that out into the individual accounts. One, it prevents AD admins from adding themselves, which is a problem sometimes. Prevents attackers then from adding themselves, which is important. Like that's actually our goal here. But we can sometimes. Can you trust your AD admins? Sorry if there's AD admins on here. You're very trustworthy, and we appreciate you. It makes adding individual accounts makes the attackers have to figure out the individual accounts that they need and then compromise those. Again, we're trying to force them to commit errors, so that we can see them in our logs. Somebody who's stolen credentials and stolen valid credentials, they're not going to trigger failed login. They're not going to generate failed login attempts. They're going to log in successfully. And that's the problem there. We need to force them to generate a failed login attempt. So using something, if I'm logging into my desktop as Plankers here, which I am now, you can all hack me. I log into my lab environment. And my infrastructure is plankers-ADM. Well, now you can hack me there too. Great, But if an attacker who's got access to AD wants to do something there, they're probably going to reset my password, and I will figure that out. Not in 341 days. I will figure that out in much shorter time period, and then the AD admin and I are going to go look at the logs. I'm going to say, hey, I can't log in. They're going to oh, well, you changed your password last Friday. And I said, no, I didn't, and then, well, yeah. And then it goes from there, but that's good. We want to catch this stuff early. Yeah, if your desktop account is compromised, you don't automatically get your admin account. I feel like we've been saying that for years in the IT space. It's easier for you to audit. You don't have to ask your AD folks to tell you who's allowed in and not. And it's a form of separation of duties, a form of least privilege, and these are solid IT InfoSec principles, separation of duties, the idea that more than one person should be involved in making a security change, because that lessens the possibility of fraud. If I'm going to do something fraudulent, I need to convince my coworker, the coworker that controls the firewall, I need to get them on board too. So that's harder, and we want to make it harder on the attackers. MFA, we talked about that, how it's not perfect, but it does go a long way. VPN's another interesting idea. And that's, I used to do that actually. I put all my management interfaces for some of my high security environments behind on their own closed network behind, and then we VPN'd into the firewall that was protecting it. And something to think about. That might be an interesting way of doing it. Bastion hosts, jump boxes, that sort of thing. You can do that as well, where the jump box, that Bastion host bridges that gap. With the VPNs, we had a secure VM that we used just on our desktops, just a few admins in that. So your mileage may vary. Finding a solution that works for you and that you don't absolutely hate is really important, is what my big message is. Some other thoughts here. Introducing two-factor authentication. There's a lot of folks that have been asking about that. Duo, Okta, Ping have solutions for network switches and things that speak LDAP. They've got these LDAP proxies. And in my past, I've been able to use, I used to be a Duo customer. This is not an advertisement. I just happened to have been one of their customers, and they were all right. Their proxy worked great, and I pointed vCenter server at their proxy, and then their proxy connected to Active Directory. And then anytime somebody went to log in, it would trigger the two-factor authentication, the notification on my phone, and that worked really well. What VMware does, what does VMware do about this stuff? We actually have a Horizon VDI environment. Most organizations aren't big enough to warrant a whole VDI environment to themselves or whatever, but but this is what we do. We've got and so sysadmins at VMware, boy, I need more caffeine this morning. The sysadmins at VMware log into a non-persistent desktop image provided by Horizon to do their administration tasks and things like that. So that's kind of cool. Vulnerabilities, I mentioned that those are availability problems, and so network failover. One of the things, eventually you're going to have to patch your network switches. How do you keep the attackers out of the network switches? It's a big concern too. Your top of rack switches, they need updates, they need care and feeding like everything else. And if you miss something, that's the tricky thing. These attackers are curious, they're patient, they will inventory everything. And if there's a vulnerability in a switch, they'll exploit that too, because we all trust our network switches. And having an attacker in on the network switches is tough, because they get access to everything then. They can jump VLANs, whatever they want. And so how do you patch that? Well, people don't usually patch those because the failover workloads notice the failover. The distributed switch and the failover inside of vSphere, just the basic failover stuff. It's good, but it's not as fast as something like LACP. LACP, the link aggregation control protocol, or link aggregation groups and multi-chassis link aggregation groups. The multi-chassis stuff is one of my favorite things, having two top of rack switches that you do multi-chassis LACP to a host, and then you can just patch them, and the failover is milliseconds. And that's really cool, but it doesn't work with all storage and things. But this is one of those things. If you remove the friction from patching as part of the design process, then you can do it more often, and you don't have your workload admins complaining to your bosses that you're, causing them problems and things. You know, and so that's tricky, you know, but that's something that you can do. You can retrofit environments with it or whatever, but you need to go talk to your network admins if you're not the network admin to do LACP. vSAN architecture, you know, a lot of availability things that you can do there, failures to tolerate. You know, what if you lose a host? What if that host is compromised? That sort of thing. You know, how are you going to set that sort of thing up? But the real thing that I talk about with availability is also DNS and NTP and KMS and Active Directory. In my past, and even now in my lab environment, I've got a separate host that I do that just stands alone. It's part of vCenter or whatever, but it's the first thing that I turn on, and it's got a DNS resolver on it. It's got an Active Directory domain controller. It's got NTP server. Actually, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm using Internet NTP at this point. And then it's got a clustered KMS. And all of these things are clustered with another VM. Well, one, you can turn all that stuff on, and then we can then all the rest of my infrastructure can use that. That can be the first thing up, and now I've got DNS, now I've got Active Directory, all of that stuff. But how do you patch that then? Well, I've clustered it, so my DNS resolver uses keep alive D to cluster with another VM very much like it that's in one of my main clusters. And so I can patch that host, I can shut that stuff down, I can patch that host, and I don't lose DNS resolution, for example. AD, I've got 2 AD DCs there, you know, and same sort of thing. KMS, I've got those clustered as well, so that I never lose contact with something there. And that, again, remove friction from patching. You get to do it more often, and it's easier. You don't have to take outages, you don't have to negotiate with people or any of that stuff, you know. So anyhow, just more steps on the evolution here. And so, yeah, I mentioned resources. I'm not done with the talk here, but I want to move on to the vulnerabilities and stuff. But core.vmware.com, we've got a lot of cool stuff out there. Pardon me, if you go out and here, hang on. If you go out and you can check out stuff, like I said, in the solutions menu, there's compliance, there's security, there's ransomware resilience, that sort of thing. There's stuff about ESXi ARGs, all kinds of stuff. There's also I can't advance anymore here. There's the security configuration guides for 8, for 7, well, for the 6s and that. We've moved those to the archive because 6.7 and 6.5 are now end of support, but they're still out there. We test this guidance. That's actually going to be one of the biggest things about vSphere 8 Update 1 is that all of the hardening guidance that's part of the security configuration guide and the DISA STIGs in the US will be part of the test suites for vSphere now, you know, and that seems like an obvious thing, but it's not, you know, and especially where things aren't set by default, you know, and so that's going to be huge, you know, and making sure that all the stuff is tested in that. Other things on the internet, CIS, the Center for Internet Security, does great work advocating for security in that, but their guides, you know, they don't have the same testing facilities in that we do, and so yeah, just kind of keep that in mind. If you do nothing else today, please sign up for not just VMware's security advisory mailing list, but all of your vendors. You know, our mailing list here, if you go to the advisory page, you can just sign up for it. You'll get an email the moment that, well, relatively quickly after a VMSA is published. You know, we're talking minutes, not hours or days. And I like to joke that it's the most negative, the worst mailing list that VMware runs, because it's all bad news, you know, but there's no way to tell just the good guys of the world that there's a problem. The bad guys are listening too, you know, they get to see everything, but they never share their plans with us. You know, it's very unfair. And so this tries to level the playing field. We want everyone. The best we can do is tell everybody and hope that that helps you do something about it quickly, you know, and if you're set up well to patch, then you can go kick that process off. I've always enjoyed, you know, having my InfoSec people come up to me a day later and say, hey, Bob, there's we've got a problem. What's the problem? Well, there's a critical security advisories. Oh yeah, I know. Oh, we've already patched. They look at me and like, what? Like, you already patched? Yeah, our patching process is streamlined. It's a standard change in ITIL or whatever. Like, we can just do it, vMotion and all that stuff. And like, cool, so so something to think about. This is a VMSA. If you dive a little bit deeper into that page, the security advisory page, and my apologies, they redid this page recently and I don't have new screenshots for it. This is the log4j one, and we'll just go through the anatomy of an advisory here. When we release an advisory, there's always an ID. If there's a dot, so this is dot 3. Dot 3 means it's the third revision. We do revise the advisories from time to time, especially if it's a fluid situation. If the situation is changing, then we will revise it. Most of our advisories are pretty straightforward. Somebody reports. The way it works usually is that somebody reports a vulnerability or a problem to us, a security researcher. We get 90 to 120 days to fix it, roughly. We work it out with the security researcher. They want to publish their findings. They want to get credit for their work. We want to fix the product, but that time allows us to work it into the normal testing processes and that. Log4j wasn't like that at all. Well, so the normal process, basically, once we release it, we've got documentation, it's tested, we know the workarounds, all that stuff generally. Log4j was what we call a 0 day. It was just the entire world found out about it all at once that morning here in the US, and we all got to figure it out together, which is usually not what we want. We'd like to have more packaged stuff. So log4j, I think it's like up to .8 or something like that now, but all that stuff is fixed. You should patch for sure. But so that's the IDs. CVSS, that's a score, a common vulnerability scoring system, CVSS, version 3. Those CVSS scores can be 0 to 10, 10 being the worst, 0 being basically, why did you report this? It's not an issue. And log4j was a 10. 10 generally is unauthenticated remote compromise. And so, anybody with access to the network interface of a vulnerable system can get in. And that's why you need that compensating controls, right? 10s we would label as critical. You see the red critical square off to the left there. But vendors always score things. So it's vendors that score things. VMware comes up with this number, and we come up with it from our point of view. The tricky thing is the difference between an important or a moderate, a lot of the important security vulnerabilities, the CVSS scores of 7, 8 maybe, and the difference between those and criticals are usually authentication. One is unauthenticated, the other one is the attacker needs to be able to log in. But if you go back to, hey, an attacker might have the ability to log in because they've got a domain account, that takes some of these vulnerabilities that are important and promotes them to critical, and something to keep in mind. But that's how the scoring system works. You can go out to, if you want to look at it directly, just there's a site, there's several sites, but the CVE and CVSS scoring system, there's rating systems and based on confidentiality, loss of confidentiality, integrity, availability in different aspects. And so there's a whole scoring thing that you can play with in that. So there's always there's an issue date. Clearly there's an updated date, so you can see how old this guidance is. It lists the CVEs, the common vulnerability and exposure database IDs. So the CVE database, we've got IDs for them. They're I wouldn't say they're sequential. Vendors will often reserve IDs in the database. So you can't read anything into it necessarily about how many vulnerabilities there were in a year by looking at, the number there, but yeah, we tend to just get them when we need them, that sort of thing. And then important thing, impacted products. If a product, if a product is unsupported, no longer sold, but no longer supported by VMware, we're not going to evaluate it as part of these processes. If a product doesn't show up in impacted products, we often get Log4j especially. There was a long list of products, and because like many places, we use Log4j all over the place. It's an important part of the Java programming ecosystem, and that's what made it hard. But if it's not on the impacted products list, it's not impacted. We go through our security engineers go through all of it and figure that stuff out. And so if it's not listed there, it's not impacted. If you do have a question about it, or you think we're wrong, like we're not, we try very hard not to be wrong, because that's serious business, but but we have ways you can ask us and that, but in general, that's the correct list. There's an RSS feed, there's signing up for the security advisories. And that email, by the way, looks something like this. It comes from security-announce@vmware.com. And it will have, this is the update or whatever, the revised advisory. And it'll tell you what we revised in it and that sort of thing. So, but a lot of folks for Log4j have only found out about it from our advisories. And we're proud of that. Also, that created a problem because everyone thought it was a problem with VMware products, which it was. Don't get me wrong, it was a problem in VMware products, but it was a more global problem too, and so we actually spent a bunch of cycles trying to remind people that they have to go, don't just patch vSphere, you got to go look for this elsewhere, and that took a little bit. So scrolling down in an advisory, we've got, there's workarounds. If there are workarounds, we'll note where they are, that sort of thing. Notes often have interesting things in them. We'll often note if this is being exploited in the wild by attackers, and we'll have frequently asked questions list. There's a link here. Generally, if it's we'll only do that if it's a critical vulnerability, and if the vulnerability has nuances to it, if there's things to consider. If it's just straight up patch, there's no Q&A. In anything we're going to get asked, we're just going to tell people to patch, and so workarounds are tricky too, because workarounds, you end up spending more time maintaining the workaround. And so we understand why people want the workarounds. We just tend to encourage the patching too. And then down below, the response matrix. So you've got the product and version, the affected version. And again, versions that aren't supported won't show up, and that's another common question we get, like if a vSphere vulnerability came out right now, it would not list 6.5 and 6.7, and we will get asked, are 6.5 and 6.7 vulnerable to whatever, and our answer is basically, yeah, probably, but we didn't evaluate it because it's past support. And so that's the tricky thing about running software that's beyond the support date. So that's the trade-off. Security is a trade-off. Risk management's a trade-off. That's the risk you run. So fixed version will normally, in this case, Log4j, the patches were being tested and things. Patches were pending. There was a workaround and a link to the knowledge base article for the workarounds themselves. And so when there's a fixed version, that'll be an update to the thing. The workarounds, in this case, something I learned about the knowledge base that I didn't know, for all these years, I didn't realize this, and I lost my arrow here, but, there's a subscribe thing right here, and so these fluid situations, if you've got a KB article that you're interested in, you can subscribe to it, and that's pretty handy. And then the elephant in the room, I've mentioned ESXi ARGs a few times here. ESXi ARGs, a lot of folks worried about it. Journalists love to write about, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt sort of things. But organizations that have been patching, that have good security controls and defense in depth, are protecting their management interfaces, aren't affected by ESXi ARGs any more than they are any other ransomware toolkit. that sort of thing. And so what you often see a lot of news around like, oh, there's new Lockbit ransomware for ESXi. The attackers put together these are toolkits. They put together toolkits like we put together toolkits, because it saves them time. They're not dumb, and they use all the same tactics that we do, and so for software development and stuff, they've got a toolkit, they've got packages that they install, that sort of thing. And so these, what about Lockbit, what about whatever, like I can't even think of some of them. And it's just a toolkit, there's not a single solution to it. The solution is don't let them in, detect them before they get that far. ESXi ARGs is a little different in that they're doing the ransomware right away. They're getting after it right away there. They're not stopping to look around. They're not trying to steal data or anything. They're just encrypting everything that they find. And it's mostly hosts that are unpatched. The InfoSec community thought it was the OpenSLP vulnerabilities that they were using, and it might have been, but it also looks like they pivoted too, that they're using other vulnerabilities now as well. And so that's why our guidance, when you look at our guidance has always said, people ask, if I'm patched to this level, am I secure from the OpenSLP stuff? Well, you might be, but what about all the other vulnerabilities that might exist there? Keep current. And that's our guidance. We don't know, the attackers don't tell us what they're doing. They don't send us a memo. They don't have press releases and things like that. They might be businesses, but they do kind of keep to themselves. And so we just have to guess. Unfortunately, we have to get information from people who have been attacked and observed it, that sort of thing. And so ESXi ARGs are fast moving and they're hitting things, especially environments that just have their management interfaces. In ESXi host that's just basically sitting on the internet, and there's a number of providers, there's a number of ISPs in that. Hetzner, I've been messing around with their stuff a bit in Germany and Finland and that. And they're pretty cool. You can actually deploy. So Hetzner was one of the ISPs, and OVH was another one. OVH is like this as well, where you can get a physical host from them, and then you've got KVM to it. You can actually install ESXi directly there, And what did I say? The biggest lie sysadmins tell? It's I'll come back and fix it later. They open up both of those services. You can put external firewall rules on the management interfaces for those hosts. But, people run into problems with them and say, you know what, I'm going to open this up. I did it the other day to myself, I'm going to open this up just to see if it solves the problem. Well, it turns out it did, but I made sure I was doing a Linux box, and I made sure the Linux box had a proper firewall running on it. But, people, they don't come back. And my Linux box in Hetzner, for example, one of them that I deployed when I logged in, the first time I logged in as root, there had already been 16 failed attempts at logging in. That's the internet. The internet is always scanning. It's always evil, and you cannot be exposed like that. So that's the ESXi ARGs thing. We try very hard not to tell people you're doing it wrong, but we need people to realize that, one, they need to patch. Two, security is a continuous thing. Compliance you do every 1 or 2 years, that sort of thing. But if that's all you're doing for security, you're going to have a rough time. And, security is a continuous thing, and it's always has been, and so we need people to realize that. We need people to realize that they shouldn't put their their management interfaces, not just for vSphere, but for storage arrays and for firewalls and for all kinds of stuff. All of that stuff, you can find it in Shodan. Shodan.io is a search engine for IoT, basically, things that devices on the internet. And, you find storage arrays in there, holy buckets, that's not good, and so, trying to get people to realize this. And, this is why I talk about design concepts. That's not something, don't put your stuff on the internet is not something I can put in the hardening guide. Mostly, so at any rate, that is my spiel. I appreciate you all. Thank you for being our customers. Thank you for inviting me to talk. If there's any questions or whatever, I've kind of been keeping an eye out here, but there hasn't been anything. If there's any questions now or later you can reach out to me. I'm just rplankers@vmware.com. My email is always a mess, so I'm sorry about that. I'm Plankers on Twitter. Your mileage may vary there. That's my personal account, but you can always hit me up and with questions and that. And yeah, so thanks, folks.
Thank you, Bob. I mean, I think definitely it's a very insightful session, and there are a lot of part like we always prepare to do, but as you mentioned, like we'll do that next time, and it's very difficult to come back to those steps, being a busy, heavy schedule throughout the day. And I hope people will find out this session insightful. We will share this recording with our audience. And right now, I can't see any questions from the audience, but
No,
in
I
future,
come.
if we are
Yeah.
going to get any, then definitely like we can move them forward to you via Jatin.
So Bob, just coming back to the topic of presentation, I see. I mean, you completely mentioned. I mean, like people adding to user to admin group, just for the ease of access and all those things. And it kind of become a changing permission after some time. They kind of get into the perception that changing anything might it might cause issues with the environment, and it kind of become a snowflake environment. As long
Yeah.
as is it working, don't touch it.
Yeah.
But in
Yeah.
in other thing, it's fine. But in terms of security, it becomes very chaotic and vulnerable. So I think that's one of the biggest issue I see with various customers, and especially with the admin permission, they don't see the virtual data center as the physical data center,
Yeah.
though it is the same,
Right.
right? You have 3-4 layers of security in physical data center, but where actual action is happening, you don't keep a lot of security there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And yeah, perceptions are everything. And people, if you can't touch it, if you can't touch it, it's not real, right? Like
Yeah.
it can't hurt me
Yeah.
if you can't touch it, like so yeah, figuring this out, unfortunately those organizations learn the hard way, and at a certain point, you can help them just so much, yeah, but hopefully they will listen to your wisdom and come around, but yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I would say some of the issues has been from the SX side as well. Like, in a previous VCF deployment, you need to keep your SSS service on all the time. And that has been came back from customers that, hey, why should be keeping it on? And that we have rectified over the
Yeah.
time.
So
Yeah.
VCF, the newer versions of VCF still need SSH in certain cases, and that's
Yeah.
that's mostly our fault. We don't have
Yeah.
APIs for some of the stuff that we want to do. And so creating the API and actually shipping the product are not in sync there. The API needs to happen at the vSphere level, but VCF wants to get a product out the door, that sort of thing. So for that, and what I tell people, if you do need, like VCF, if you do need SSH for something, that's fine. SSH is really a troubleshooting interface, and it's meant to be off. And so turn it on. You can you can use Power CLI to turn it on. You can you go do your thing, and then you can shut it off again, and that's what VCF does now. VCF, I want to say 4.3, 4.4.
Yeah. With 4.3, I think they came up with it, or
4.3 did a
yeah.
lot of work because
Yeah.
this shows up in compliance scans, especially.
Yeah.
And so VCF 4.3, there were a lot of changes like that. And so, and that's good, so making VCF more capable, more able to be secured like that. But again, it's always a trade-off, and that trade-off is often functionality. Do you want to get something done, or do you want to be secure? And you got to find where that is.
Yeah, that's a chaos between, in every organization, between their firewall team and the system admin. It in fact not, the end user, but when we try to deploy things and it gets blocked at the firewall, and then it takes a lot of time. I mean, there is something, the gap that can, there should be a quick resolution for that. But yeah, many organizations we see, like, one of the biggest banking deployment where I see, because of just to open such port, they took 1.5 months to open those ports to get, the environment deployed. So that, obviously affect them. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's well, and none of these problems, what you're hitting at here is none of these problems are technical problems. They're political problems. They're
Right.
risk problems. Somebody there, when it takes a month and a half to get a firewall change made, that's because nobody wants to be the person that approved it in case it goes wrong, and somebody eventually is going to have to do this, and that's one of the things why we really tried to write down the firewall ports and that to just make it, we need this for the product to work. Please leave your vSphere admins alone. Do this. It's absolutely a requirement, and but yeah, no, it's tricky. It's well, what if bad things happen? Well, what if bad things happen? The answer is not to hide from them. The answer is to have a good to have a plan. Like business continuity plans should encompass ransomware, that security plans. There should be something. What happens? How do we detect a breach? What happens if this firewall rule? How do we know this firewall rule is working? How do we know that? How do we make sure that 3 years from now it hasn't been changed? Those are all tricky questions for organizations because we just don't, we always want to move forward. We don't want to maintain all of this stuff, but you have to. So I don't know, there's no good answer, but like I said, it's a people and process problem mostly.
Yeah.
So Bob, it has been, great session. I'm going
Thank
to
you.
implement a lot of those which has been mentioned here. I have done it. I've been through your security hardening guide, and they are so great. Thanks for all the details that you have shared.
No, thanks for having me on. And if you've the other thing too, if there's anything you'd like to see in the security configuration guide, the hardening guidance, let me know. It's not perfect, but I've got a list of other things that people send me stuff like, hey, why isn't X in there? Well, let's add it to the testing stuff for, vSphere 8 update 2. We'll make sure that it's tested and then it works, that it doesn't break VCF, that sort of thing. And then we'll add it. There's a lot of stuff in there that customers have contributed to in that. Also fixing my Power CLI examples, Power CLI 13 changed some stuff. And so a German fellow actually just sent me all new Power CLI corrections, which I appreciate deeply. And so, yeah, it might seem like us vendors are, somewhere else and, protected from talking to people or whatever, but we're pretty accessible and we like the feedback. And so I always encourage people to let us know if something's bugging you, just in the product in itself, because that's the only way we know to fix it. If you don't tell us, we can't read your mind.
In fact, security is one domain where feedback matters the most.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and especially too with security, if there's something that we can do to make it easier to deploy security, to make it easier to use, that's huge, and because people often don't do security because it's tough. It adds, you need more staff time, that sort of thing. And so if there's something that we can do that we're not doing there, let us know, because we want the stuff to be easy to use so people do actually use it. They turn it on and they keep it on, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, let us know. But thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, let me stop the recording.